Chevrolet called it progress. Mechanics called it a ticking time bomb. The 265 turbofire promised glory, then ate itself alive in garages across America. It crushed Ford on the track, but sometimes crushed its own pistons first. This wasn't just an engine, it was Detroit's most dangerous joke. In 1955, Chevrolet dropped a bombshell on America's highways, the 265 turbofire V8. To the public, it was everything they'd been waiting for, a compact, affordable engine that put V8 power within reach of the everyday driver. Ads praised it as the super power pack, and buyers lined up for it like it was the future on four wheels. On Sunday afternoons, race fans watched drivers like Herb Thomas and Buck Baker rocket to victory with Chevrolets powered by the new small block. The engine was a revelation, rewriting the rules of performance and forcing every rival in Detroit to take notice. But behind the showroom glamour and trackside glory, a darker truth stalked the 265. Mechanics cursed it as a time bomb, a motor that could as easily kill itself as win a race. Its oiling system left critical parts starving, pistons seized under heat, and engines sometimes collapsed before they reached 30,000 miles. What Chevrolet had unleashed wasn't just revolutionary, it was dangerous. The same block that delivered trophies on Sunday could be back in the shop on Monday, wounded or destroyed. This dual nature earned it a nickname, whispered in garages across the country, the oil-starved assassin. That contradiction, savior and killer, was the shocking essence of the 265. It made Chevrolet look unstoppable in the headlines while quietly bleeding credibility in repair shops. Yet for GM, there was no choice. They had been humiliated by Ford's Y-block V8, and the market was shifting rapidly toward 8-cylinder power. The 265 wasn't just an engine, it was a desperate gamble for survival, and Chevrolet knew the risks when they shipped it. To understand why they rushed such a flawed but brilliant design into production, we need to step back to the early 1950s when consumer demand for V8s skyrocketed, Ford seized the lead, and a memo from Chevrolet's Thomas Keating rang like a corporate alarm bell. That was the moment the billion-dollar gamble began. By the early 1950s, the numbers painted a bleak picture for Chevrolet. In 1950, only about 26% of American buyers wanted a V8. By 1952, that number had climbed to 33%. By 1954, fully half the market demanded V8 power. Ford saw the writing on the wall and launched its Y-block V8 in 1954. It wasn't just a new engine, it was a public humiliation for Chevrolet. Ford and even smaller players like Studebaker could sell modern V8s, while Chevrolet, the sales king of General Motors, was stuck peddling 6 cylinders that suddenly looked outdated. The pressure reached a breaking point in 1952 when Chevrolet general manager Thomas Keating fired off a blunt memo to GM's top brass. "We've become too 6-cylinder minded." His warning was more than complaint, it was a corporate scream for survival. If Chevrolet didn't respond, it risked losing not only sales, but its very crown as America's volume leader. Panic spread through Detroit, and the solution wasn't going to be cheap. GM committed what became known as the billion-dollar gamble. Massive new facilities were purchased, including enormous plants in Flint, Michigan, and Tonawanda, New York. Flint, in particular, became ground zero for Chevrolet's survival strategy. It was here that the engineers would be tasked with creating an engine that wasn't just competitive, but transformational. The stakes could not have been higher. Ford had proven that the V8 wasn't a luxury anymore, it was the standard. If Chevrolet didn't act fast, their 6-cylinder dominance would vanish overnight. GM executives demanded not just a new engine, but an entirely new approach to engine building. Efficiency, cost, performance, scalability, everything had to align, or Chevrolet's future would collapse. The project first landed in the hands of Ed Kelly, the respected engineer behind the Stove-Bold 6, but soon doubts grew that Kelly's vision was too conservative, too tied to the past. GM needed something bolder, someone willing to rip up the blueprint and start from scratch. In May 1952, a rising star named Ed Cole was brought in to lead, and Cole's philosophy was as radical as the market demanded. You don't tweak an old design, you start with a clean sheet of paper. When Ed Cole took over Chevrolet's V8 program in May 1952, he immediately rejected the path laid out by his predecessor, Ed Kelly. Kelly had been working on what was essentially a downsized Cadillac 331, a heavy, costly, conservative design with little room for growth. Cole looked at it and dismissed it outright. "You don't tweak an old design, you start with a clean sheet of paper." That mantra defined everything that followed. Cole's vision wasn't just about horsepower, it was about revolutionizing the very way engines were built. He prioritized lightness, manufacturability, and scalability. He believed Chevrolet didn't just need a V8 for 1955, it needed a flexible platform that could evolve for decades. To achieve that, his team pioneered thin-wall casting techniques. Using green sand cores, they could cast engine blocks upside down, giving precise control over bore spacing and wall thickness. The result? Walls as thin as 532 of an inch, without sacrificing strength. Another key decision was to lock the bore centers at 4.4 inches. That dimension, seemingly small, dictated everything from crankshaft length to engine width. It kept the block compact, only 21.75 inches long, making the V8 remarkably short for its class. Compact dimensions meant lighter weight, easier serviceability, and room for future growth. Cole's clean sheet wasn't just philosophy, it was geometry that would ripple through Chevrolet history. Cole's radical approach transformed panic into possibility. Instead of copying Cadillac or Ford, Chevrolet was about to define its own path. Thin-wall casting allowed for efficient mass production at lower cost, while compact bore centers gave engineers the flexibility to enlarge displacement over time. What started as a 265 could evolve into 283, 327, and eventually even the legendary 350. Cole wasn't just solving Chevrolet's immediate crisis, he was laying down DNA for an entire family of small blocks. But a revolutionary design was only as good as its execution. To prove the engine wasn't just efficient but powerful, Cole's team loaded the new block with cutting-edge features: over-square dimensions, wedge-shaped chambers, forged cranks, and lightweight internals. That combination would make the 265 not just practical but thrilling. The clean sheet was now becoming a weapon. When Chevrolet unveiled the 265 Turbofire in 1955, it was more than an engine. It was a declaration of intent. At just 21.75 inches long, the block was astonishingly compact for a V8, giving it rigidity and leaving extra space under the hood. This wasn't coincidence. Ed Cole's team had reimagined every inch with precision. The design was over-square, with a bore larger than its stroke, allowing higher revs and more efficient breathing. That single choice unlocked an entirely new level of performance in a small, affordable package. The combustion chamber was wedge-shaped with a large quench area, designed to generate turbulence as the piston rose. This turbulence mixed the fuel-air charge more completely, leading to faster, more consistent combustion. Spark plugs were placed directly in the hottest zone of the chamber, ensuring even flame travel. The intake manifold doubled as a valley pan, an elegant solution that saved both weight and complexity. Each element was a masterstroke in marrying efficiency with power. The list of innovations read like a blueprint for the future. Hollow pushrods carrying oil directly to stamped rocker arms, fully water-jacketed ports that improved cooling, aluminum pistons for lighter reciprocating mass, and a forged steel crankshaft built to withstand punishing loads. Even the rocker covers carried Chevrolet's script, evidence that style mattered as much as engineering. The genius of the 265 lay in how it balanced extremes. It was affordable to produce, yet advanced enough to compete with the best. Its compact design cut weight and simplified maintenance while offering room for growth. In Cole's clean sheet philosophy, this wasn't a one-off motor, but a platform. The same 4.4-inch bore spacing would allow the 265 to grow into the 283, the 327, and eventually the legendary 350 engines that became the backbone of Chevrolet performance for decades. For the first time, Chevrolet had built a V8 that could outthink Ford, not just outmuscle it. Yet beneath the marvel lurked compromises, choices made in haste to beat Ford to market. Those flaws would earn the 265 its darker name, the oil-starved assassin. For all its engineering brilliance, the 265 Turbofire carried flaws so severe that mechanics quickly gave it a grim nickname, the oil-starved assassin. The most notorious problem lay in its lubrication system. At launch, Chevrolet offered only an optional bypass oil filter, which cleaned barely 10% of the circulating oil. That meant grit, carbon, and metal shavings cycled through bearings and lifters unchecked. Engines that should have lasted years sometimes failed before 30,000 miles. Smokey Yunick, the master builder, vented his fury. "Chevy gave us a great motor, but forgot to keep it alive." Heat revealed the second flaw. Engineers had designed pistons with tight thermal clearances to reduce weight and improve efficiency. On paper, it was clever. On the track or under southern heat, it was deadly. Pistons swelled beyond their limits, scuffing cylinder walls, cracking skirts, and sometimes seizing outright. Mechanics called it the scuffer, and owners who pushed their Chevys hard knew the risk with every drive. Other compromises surfaced. The 265 had no positive crankcase ventilation, only primitive breathers. Camshaft lubrication was rudimentary. Oil distribution to the rocker arms was inconsistent, forcing engineers to improvise fixes mid-production. All these flaws stemmed from the same truth. Chevrolet had rushed the 265 into production to fight Ford's V8 dominance, and the details hadn't caught up. The result was an engine that lived a double life. On Sunday, it delivered trophies, powering NASCAR legends to victory. On Monday, it left mechanics praying the next customer's engine hadn't seized. The brilliance that made the 265 revolutionary also made it fragile. Yet Chevrolet couldn't turn back. They doubled down, issuing service bulletins, revising pistons, and finally adding a full-flow filter by 1956. The damage, though, was already written into its reputation. The 265 was both a savior and a killer, proof that desperation breeds both genius and danger. Still, despite these deadly flaws, buyers kept lining up. The sales numbers told a story even more shocking than the breakdowns. The gamble was working. Despite the flaws, the market's reaction to the 265 Turbo Fire was nothing short of explosive. Buyers didn't care about oil starvation or piston seizures. They cared about power, price, and prestige. And Chevrolet delivered all three. For just $99 more than the six-cylinder, a buyer could step into V8 territory. For a little extra, the Power Pack version brought a 4-barrel carburetor, dual exhausts, and a healthy 180 horsepower. Suddenly, everyday drivers could enjoy performance once reserved for the wealthy. The numbers spoke louder than the critics. In 1955, 43% of all Chevrolet buyers opted for the new V8, a staggering figure for an engine barely out of its infancy. Demand was so intense that the Flint, Michigan engine plant was overwhelmed. GM had to bring the Tonawanda, New York plant online just to keep up, and even then, supply lagged behind demand. Dealers reported losing sales because customers refused to wait. The V8 wasn't just an option, it was the must-have upgrade of the year. This success proved the gamble had paid off. Chevrolet had turned humiliation into triumph, silencing Ford's advantage and reclaiming its crown as America's sales leader. The 265 wasn't perfect, but it was accessible, affordable, and thrilling to drive. For the average buyer, it transformed Chevrolet from family car into performance brand. Most importantly, the success gave GM the confidence to keep refining the design. Within a year, the full-flow oil filter was standard. Piston clearances were adjusted, lubrication improved, but the core architecture remained intact, and that was the real story. Chevrolet had built not just an engine, but a foundation. The public didn't yet know it, but the 265 had laid the groundwork for a dynasty. The small block family would soon evolve into legends, the 283, 327, and 350, each building on the DNA of the rushed but revolutionary 1955 V8. And nowhere would that DNA shine brighter than on the racetrack, where Chevrolet's new weapon would terrify Ford and ignite one of racist's fiercest rivalries. On the racetrack, the 265 TurboFire V8 became something more than an engineering experiment. It became a terror. In its first year, 1955, Chevrolet entered NASCAR with Smokey Yunick, preparing cars that looked modest but hid a secret weapon under the hood. Tuned for racing, the compact V8 produced far more than its rated horsepower, shocking rivals who underestimated its small displacement. The results were nothing short of historic. That season, Chevrolet drivers racked up 38 NASCAR wins. Herb Thomas claimed 12 victories, including the grueling Southern 500. Buck Baker added 3 more, while Tim Flock stunned the field by taking 18 pole positions. For a brand new engine rushed to market, the performance was unprecedented. Fans who once dismissed Chevrolet's six-cylinder cars suddenly saw the bow tie logo as a symbol of speed and dominance. Yet even in triumph, there was danger. The same flaws that haunted the street engines stalked the race cars. Oil starvation, piston scuffing, and fragile internals made every lap a gamble. Herb Thomas famously said, "This little mouse has the heart of a lion when it stays together. You've got to nurse it, but boy does it run." Buck Baker was harsher. "It made power Ford couldn't touch, but you listened for the death rattle every lap." This paradox only added to the legend. The 265 was fragile yet ferocious, unpredictable yet unbeatable when it held together. For Chevrolet, the wins were all that mattered. Every victory on Sunday translated into showroom sales on Monday, reinforcing the idea that Chevy had finally built a winner. The racing's success also elevated Smokey Yunick into near-mythical status. His ability to push the small block to its limits proved that Chevrolet's gamble had produced not just a new engine, but a platform with endless potential. By 1956, improvements began to solve its worst flaws, but the reputation was already sealed. The 265 had shown the world that Chevrolet could dominate NASCAR, and in doing so, it laid the foundation for a dynasty of small blocks that would define American performance for decades. By the late 1950s, the Chevrolet 265 Turbo Fire had already transformed from experiment to cornerstone. It wasn't just an engine, it was the seed of the small block dynasty. From the 283 to the 327 and the legendary 350, all carried the DNA of Cole's clean sheet gamble. Yet, the original 265 never escaped its shadow. It was brilliant, yes, but also rushed, fragile, and plagued by flaws that mechanics never forgot. Its reputation as both savior and assassin lingered, staining its legacy with equal parts triumph and tragedy. For Chevrolet, the contradiction was unavoidable. The company had saved its dominance, outselling Ford and reclaiming glory in NASCAR, but at a cost. Each broken piston and seized bearing was a reminder of the gamble they had taken. The 265 wasn't just a machine, it was a corporate risk cast in iron. And so the haunting questions remain. What if Ed Cole had been given one more year? Would the oil-starved assassin have been born a legend instead of a liability? What if Ford's Y-block hadn't forced Chevrolet's panic? Would the small block revolution have happened at all? These what-ifs make the 265 more than an engine. It becomes a story about fear, pressure, and the price of chasing dominance. In truth, the gamble worked. Chevrolet's daring move gave birth to a dynasty that powered Corvettes, Camaros, and countless street machines. The flaws of the 265 faded, but its architecture endured, proving that even imperfection can ignite greatness. The shocking truth is this: the 265 didn't just save Chevrolet, it defined American horsepower. The 265 Turbo Fire was both a savior and a saboteur, an engine that risked Chevrolet's future while building its empire. Without it, there would be no small block dynasty, no golden age of muscle, no legacy that still roars today. That is the shocking truth behind Chevy's deadly 265. So what do you think? Was it a brilliant gamble that secured Chevrolet's crown, or a reckless risk that nearly destroyed it? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a story on legendary classic cars.